Hey guys, and welcome back to another IronWill podcast with me, Shane Warner, and
Jon Chase.
So what this podcast is all about is we are trying to get stories from people that have been through a traumatic experience in their lives and came out a different person.
Yeah, they have all created an iron will. So what is an iron will? A burning determination that cannot be stopped or hindered by anything, willing to do anything to get a desired outcome, extremely resilient. So what we like to say is just keep punching.
Yeah. So sit back and relax, and we're going to start the show. And today we have Jessy Munch on the podcast with us. And how I met Jessy was through Instagram, and she saw something I tagged Judy Deadlifts in, and she started following me and just asked about the podcast, and I was glad to invite her to be on it. And so I'm just going to have her kind of introduce herself. Here she is, Jessy Munch.
Hi, my name's Jessy Munch, and I'm from Portland, Oregon. And I am a TBI survivor, and I think that's also kind of how I found Shane, because of the TBI thing. Mm-hmm. And I just, before I tell my story, wanted to give a little shout out. Today is the 1-year anniversary since we lost our friend Justin with Reborn Enterprises in Boise, Idaho, in a paragliding accident. And so I just want to give a shout out to him, because he taught me a lot about IronWill and how it is to be strong. And he went from being paralyzed to walking, and then died separately in a different accident. Yeah. But he definitely was the epitome of having an iron will.
Yeah, that's totally just what I was going to say. So,
okay.
So I want to start out this podcast by having you tell me about your high school years, because I know on the questions I had you answer, you wrote a lot about the high school years. So,
okay. Yeah. In, I think like 9th grade is when I had a lot of changes, and like the people I hung out with weren't very nice. And I just kind of had to find new friends, and I kind of found friends that were accepting of me, but they were more of like the partier type people. Mm-hmm. And I ended up skipping school a lot. We partied a lot. School was not a priority for me. We did a little bit of drugs, but nothing major, but it still affected the way I was in life. And I lost all my motivation and dropped out of school and moved in with a boyfriend at 16. It just really, I just was going down a path I didn't like, and I didn't realize it till later. And I had a bad experience and was like, what am I doing? And so then I moved home and with my parents and kind of started life over.
So can you kind of explain about your parents? What did your parents think when you moved in with this guy?
I don't remember, but my parents are amazing, but they're also very, let me figure stuff out for myself, which could definitely, now I could see, like, not probably the best, especially being a mom, but they're great parents, super supportive. I've been there through my whole traumatic brain injury. Like, they're amazing, but a very different life from me. Like, my mom didn't graduate high school. And so I don't think it was as big of a deal for them, because they were successful. My dad's a construction worker, but they own their own business and have had success in their life. So I don't think it was a super big deal, because they were fine, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you ended up, how long did you stay with your boyfriend after?
When I was
16 till...
Yeah, till I was almost 17, and then I moved home. So I was with him for a few years, from like 15 to 17, but I finally realized I was going down a path I didn't like in life, and I left him and I moved home. And by saying I left him, I packed my stuff and moved out. Like, I don't even think I probably told him. I think I just
sometimes you got to do that. Yeah.
Sometimes that's how it works.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, what am I doing? I'm like, I think I was 17 at the time, and I was like, what the hell am I doing? Like, I need to go.
Yeah.
And so I went, and then I ended up meeting my ex-husband shortly thereafter.
Did you go back to school, or that was it for school?
Well, no. So I ended up then meeting my ex-husband, and I ended up getting my GED.
Okay.
And I had taken like classes in early childhood education because I worked at for daycares.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't like I went for like a year at community college off and on, but then it wasn't until my son was born, and he was born severely sick. And I spent a lot of time in the hospital with him, and I was like, oh, I want to be a nurse. So I went to school to do like nursing.
You thought of that. You thought of that when he was actually sick.
Yeah. And so I started going to school when he was, I don't know if I started when he was in the NICU, because he was in the NICU for like 3 months. I think I started right after he was out, but then he got sick again and had more stuff come up.
That's really awesome that you had that realization that you wanted to do that.
Yeah, I spent so much time at the hospital. I was like, I want to work here. And so I actually got a job in the hospital in the ER, and I started going to school for healthcare, and it just kind of all evolved through all that. I spent a lot of my time because he got sick 2 different times. So the second time was for like a Chiari malformation where he had brain surgery. And I did my homework in the hospital like every day.
That's dedication.
That is dedication. So what was he sick with? What was
when he was born, he had a malrotated bowel with a volvulus. So he lost like a ton of his small intestines.
Oh.
And so then he had failure to thrive, and he got lucky. He had like one of the worst case scenarios, but right before they couldn't save him. So they took out as much as small bowel as they could. And then separately, then we were in the hospital for failure to thrive because he was always sick all the time. And there was a resident at the children's hospital that was like obsessed with his head. And then they got him an MRI and found out he had the Chiari malformation, where like your first cervical spine is. So
does that change the way their head looks? Like, does that change the structure of their head, or what? Why was this guy obsessed with his head?
Because he had a really big head, and it does cause hydrocephalus. So he had hydrocephalus, and then after the MRI, it was found he had the Chiari malformation. So the cerebral spinal fluid wasn't moving from the brain to the spine in the right way.
Okay. Oh, wow. So I assume that went okay. Like, your son is alive and well now?
Yeah, he's 15 now, and it went good. His head is definitely not as big as it was. I look back at pictures, I'm like, oh wow, he did have a big head, but
he kind of grew into it.
Yeah, he's good. He just has struggled. Like now, he's had a lot of learning disabilities, and he's on like a full IEP at school, which is special ed, and he struggles a lot. But it's weird because now that I have a brain injury, I'm like, oh, I get my son.
Yeah. You can kind of relate to him.
Sure.
Yeah, I do things, and my husband's like, your son does that. And I'm like, really? He's like, yes, you're doing exactly what he does. Because I get overwhelmed, or I do things now, and I don't realize I overwhelm him all the time.
That's one way to look at it, like a blessing that you and your son can connect on that level now.
Yeah, I'm still learning, and I still have to, I'm still over the top to him a lot. And then I have to remember, wait, you don't like it when people are talking to you constantly. You need time to process it. Let him process.
Sure. I like what Shane just said there a second ago, because he looks at things. I've noticed that he looks at things in how can he count this as a blessing, even though it's a struggle. It's something that, I mean, you probably listened to some of the other podcasts, and he suffered from a traumatic brain injury, and he looks at it as a blessing now. And now he can relate to everybody else.
At it like an opportunity also, like
Yeah.
an opportunity to prove to myself that I can do it.
It's awesome.
Yeah, I'm big on that. Like, I can find purpose in everything. Like, I've had a lot of crap in my life, and I'm like, what's the purpose of this? And like,
Sure.
I'm a certified health educator, and I've worked
It's awesome.
in the medical system for a long time. I'm like, this is my purpose, is to do brain injury education and work with brain injury patients to give, like, to help out with something I'm going through. So
Yeah.
I'm lucky I can make it like that. And I volunteer for brain injury programs, and I do anything to try to help people save their lives if something like this happens.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we're going to get into that story. First, though, your college. You went to college, right?
Yeah.
What made you decide to go, back, like, not just back to school, get your GED, and then you had your kid and everything, but like, what made you really drive you to go full board?
I think, I went to school, like, for real. I finally went to the university once my son was sick, but then I always had in the back of my head, like, what if I get divorced? What am I going to do? Like, how am I going to support myself? Because I looked at my parents, and my mom's never worked, and my dad is the only one that works. And I'm just like, what if something...
Yeah, that's kind of scary.
What if something happens? I can't rely on just being married. And so then I went to college and got my degrees, and then I got divorced.
Since you were going to school, you were in a much better position, I'm sure.
I think it just taught me that you never know what's going to happen in life. And like, I learned that my ex-husband's amazing, and he was not amazing for me. Like, absolutely, like, perfect marriage if, like, my friends looked at our marriage, but I wasn't happy, and I realized that I wanted to be happy. So I made the decision to leave, even though everybody hated me for it and didn't understand why I was doing it. I was like, this is what I want to do. So I just, I did it, and it was hard, but I don't regret it at all now.
What did you get your degree in, Jessy?
Since I did the pre-nursing, I was able to do a double degree. So I did health education and health sciences.
Okay, cool.
And then through the health education, I found a love. Well, I found a love for it because I wanted to be a teacher early on. So you got to teach, and it was health related. And for a couple of years, I taught sex ed, and then it went from there to just doing health education to people that were in the hospital that were chronic illnesses and didn't know how to, like, control their diabetes, and they were always going to the ER. So my job was to help them stay out of the ER and find the right care and to eat right and to go to their appointment.
Yeah. So it sounds like your passion is to help people.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And it still is. Like, even though I have a brain injury and can't work full time, I constantly on Instagram have made a good community with brain injury people. And
that's great.
I've been able to help out a lot of people and connect them to resources or to navigate the healthcare system, because it's super complex and I still remember it. And if I didn't know how to do it myself, I don't know what I would do.
So let's get into your, was it a motorcycle crash, or I don't even know how you were injured? Yeah,
I raced motocross, and I had a bad day at work, and so I left work early, and I was texting my husband all day asking him if I could quit my job. So my mindset was really bad to begin with on this day. And I went to the track, and I was just practicing, and I guess I went over a jump, and I collided with somebody in the air, and I crashed and landed on the ground. But then the person behind me ran me over, and they ran over my neck, and it tore my carotid artery. So then that gave me like stroke-like symptoms.
Yeah, that's a wicked bike wreck.
Yeah, it gave me a couple brain bleeds too, and the diffuse axonal. And thank gosh I had a helmet with extra like MIPS protection in it, because I'm like, oh, it must have like I don't think I would be like I am today if I just had like a cheap helmet on, because
Right.
I came out of it pretty okay. And then I think it broke